Hello, in this session we'll be dealing with ascending tracts of the spinal cord. So in the last class it was about the gross anatomy and external features of the spinal cord. Now we'll be dealing with the ascending tracts, and the next class will be followed by descending tracts. So if we come to the white matter of spinal cord, so it has been distributed into three parts. Posterior white column, which is present between posterior median septum and posterior horn of the gray matter. You can see here this is a posterior white column. Posterior median septum and posterior horn. Between these two, you can see the posterior white column. You can see the lateral white column between the posterior horn and the anterior horn, and you can see the anterior white column between the anterior median fissure and the anterior horn. So lateral white column is between anterior and posterior horns, and anterior white column is between the anterior horn and the anterior median fissure. So three columns of white matter are present in the spinal cord. Now if you come the fibers, three types of fibers are there. Sensory fibers. The central processes of these neurons are from the dorsal root ganglia, and the ascending fibers from the nuclei of the spinal cord. So from the peripheral receptors, this dorsal root ganglion neurons will convey to the nuclei of the spinal cord. From the spinal cord, the information is carried to the brain. So these fibers are the sensory fibers, and from the higher centers, whatever fibers which descend, they reach the anterior horn of the spinal cord, and from there the motor fibers will reach the effector organs. Those are the motor fibers. And then association fibers originate and end within the spinal cord, connecting different segments. So sensory fibers, motor fibers, and association fibers. So now if you come to the tracts, like group of bundles of fibers, they are ascending and descending, and these are called as tracts within the spinal cord. So if you see here, descending tracts, these actually they descend from brain to spinal cord and peripheral organs, and ascending tracts from peripheral receptors and spinal cord to the brain. And intersegmental tracts, these are the short tracts which originate and end within the spinal cord. They interconnect neurons at different levels of spinal cord involved in intersegmental spinal reflexes. So if you observe from all the three slides, so white matter into three different regions: posterior white column, lateral white column, anterior white column. And if you see the fibers, sensory fibers, motor fibers, association fibers. And if you see the tracts, descending tracts, ascending tracts, and intersegmental tracts. Now let us have an overall overview. What are the tracts, major tracts, which we can discuss and understand their function. Like if you see descending tracts, now as I said, descending means from above downwards, like from higher center to the lower centers. That's why here you can see corticospinal, from cerebral cortex to the spinal cord, corticospinal. If it is going laterally, lateral corticospinal. If it is coming anteriorly, anterior corticospinal. And here also you can specify here crossed and uncrossed. Then rubrospinal, from red nucleus to the spinal cord, tectospinal, from tectum of midbrain to the spinal cord, vestibulospinal, from vestibular nucleus to the spinal cord, olivospinal, from olivary nucleus to the spinal cord, reticulospinal, from reticular formation to the spinal cord. So all from higher centers in the brain to the spinal cord. These are the descending tracts. Ascending tracts will be opposite, like everything starts with spino. Like if you see spinothalamic tract, if it is going on lateral side, lateral spinothalamic. If it is coming anteriorly, anterior spinothalamic. Then spinocerebellar, from spinal cord to cerebellum. So spinothalamic, from spinal cord to thalamus. And then here we have fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus, both together called as dorsal column pathway. We'll see what it is now. Then intersegmental tracts like dorsolateral tract of Leger and septomarginal tract, and then comma tract or semilunar tract. So you can see here again descending tracts, a pictorial representation. You can see from cerebral cortex to the spinal cord, corticospinal, from tectum of midbrain to the spinal cord, tectospinal, from red nucleus to the spinal cord, rubrospinal. And same opposite, from spinal cord to the thalamus, spinothalamic, from spinal cord to the tectum of midbrain, spinotectal, from spinal cord to the cerebellum, spinocerebellar, anterior posterior spinocerebellar. Now if you see, so one side they have given the representation of descending tracts, the other side they have given the representation of ascending tracts. So let us see their relative position. Like if you see in the posterior column, so there are no descending tracts, there are only ascending tracts. And if you see in the lateral column, you can see lateral corticospinal tract and rubrospinal tract. And here you can see the lateral reticulospinal tract. Here you can see the medial reticulospinal tract from reticular formation to the spinal cord. Here you can see olivospinal, vestibulospinal, and tectospinal. And here you can see anterior corticospinal tract, uncast pyramidal tracts. Now if you see on the other side, so here we are seeing only the ascending tracts. As you see in the posterior column, you can see there is fasciculus gracilis tract of Gall and fasciculus cuneatus tract of Burdach. So this is called dorsal column pathway because it is completely occupying the posterior white column. And now here you can see this is the dorsolateral tract of leisure, which will be just posterior to the tip of the posterior horn. And here you can see the posterior and anterior spinocerebellar. You can see lateral spinothalamic, and you can see anterior spinothalamic. And here you can see the spino-olivary tracts. Now, again, same thing, what we have seen in the diagram. If you observe in the anterior white column, anterior corticospinal, vestibulospinal, tectospinal, medial reticulospinal, in lateral white column, we have seen earlier, it is lateral corticospinal, rubrospinal, and lateral reticulospinal, and hypothalamus spinal. This was not shown in the diagram. So, posterior white column, there are no descending tracts. So, in posterior white column, there are only ascending tracts, namely the fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. That's why these are called dorsal column pathway. And here in the lateral white column, there are anterior and posterior spinocerebellar tracts, spinotectal and lateral spinothalamic tracts. And here you can see anterior spinothalamic tract. So now coming to the main core concept for today's discussion, it is the ascending tracts. They conduct impulses from peripheral receptors to the higher centers in the brain. So these are associated, like if you classify them, we have fibers which are associated, or tracts which are associated with pain, temperature, and crude touch, namely the spinothalamic tracts, anterior and lateral spinothalamic tracts, and tracts which are associated with fine touch and conscious proprioception, like fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus, and tracts which are associated with unconscious proprioception and muscle coordination, namely spinocerebellar tracts, anterior and posterior spinocerebellar tracts. Other tracts include the spinotectal from spinal cord to tectum of midbrain, spino-olivary from spinal cord to olivary nuclear complex, spinovestibular from spinal cord to the vestibular tracts, and spinoreticular from spinal cord to reticular formation. So now coming to the most important, so out of all these we'll be discussing spinothalamic, then dorsal column pathway, and the spinocerebellar tracts, most important ascending tracts. So first and foremost will be the dorsal column pathway, which is the fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus, otherwise called tracts of Gall and Burdock. So these are called posterior white, so these are actually located in the posterior white column, so these are also called as dorsal column pathway. So they are concerned with conscious proprioception and 2-point discrimination and vibration. So this is more like, if you say in common words, it is fine touch, otherwise 2-point discrimination. So for any sensory pathway, we need a minimum 3 neurons. Like if you see here, the first order neuron is the dorsal root ganglia. For majority of the sensation, first order neurons will be dorsal root ganglia. So second order neuron will be like nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus in the medulla oblongata. So from the dorsal root ganglia, the axons will enter into the spinal cord and they ascend up in the posterior column, that is the dorsal column, as nucleus, this fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus, and ultimately they reach the fasciculus gracilis fibers will reach the nucleus gracilis, and fasciculus cuneatus fibers will reach the nucleus cuneatus. So this is the second order neurons, and from here the axons will continue as internal arcade fibers which cross to the opposite side, and they form the medial lemniscus, and this medial lemniscus ascends upwards towards the thalamus. The third order neurons are located in the ventral posterolateral nucleus of thalamus. From here they project to the sensory cortex of cerebrum. So first order dorsal ganglia, second order are nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus, and third order are the ventral posterolateral nucleus of the thalamus. So dorsal column medial lemniscus pathway. So as you can see here, dorsal column because it is located in the posterior white column and medial lemniscus is formed. So that's why dorsal column medial lemniscus pathway is the fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus, or is called tracts of Gall and Burdock. So they're mainly concerned with conscious proprioception and 2-point discrimination and vibration. So you can see here, first order neurons from the dorsal root ganglia, fasciculus cuneatus and fasciculus gracilis. And here you can see the nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus. So here you can see the second order neuron forming the internal arcade fibers crossing to the opposite side and forming the medial lemniscus, and then they are ascending to the thalamus. So ventral posterolateral nucleus of thalamus. From there the third order neurons are going to the sensory cortex. So you need a damage to this tract will result in loss of conscious proprioception, and then 2-point discrimination and vibration and joint sense. So then coming to the spinothalamic tracts, there are 2 spinothalamic tracts. Name itself speaks from spinal cord to thalamus. The spinothalamic tracts, there are 2, namely the lateral and anterior. The lateral spinothalamic tract is mainly concerned with pain and temperature sensations. The first order neurons, again same, dorsal root ganglia. The fibers from here ascend as dorsolateral tract of leisure for 1 or 2 segments. Then they relay into the substantia gelatinosa, which is present in the posterior horn of the spinal cord. And the fibers from here cross to the opposite side through the anterior commissure and ascend as lateral spinothalamic tract in the lateral white column. So third order neurons, so these lateral lateral spinothalamic tract will relay in the ventral posterolateral nucleus, where third order neurons are located within the thalamus. From here they project to the sensory cortex. So here the most important clinical point what you have to remember is pain fibers are superficial to the temperature fibers. So if you want to relieve any kind of intractable pain, we can do cordotomy. So that is the pain fibers will become more and more superficial in the cervical region. There we can do cordotomy to relieve pain. The superficial fibers in the cervical region can be cut to relieve pain. So the anterior spinothalamic tract, these are mainly concerned with the crude touch, light touch, pressure, tickle, and itch. So lateral spinothalamic tract is concerned with pain and temperature, whereas anterior spinothalamic tract is concerned with crude touch, light touch, pressure, tickle, and itch sensations. Again, same thing. First order neuron is the dorsal root ganglia. So fibers from here ascend as dorsal lateral tract of leisure for one or two segments. Then second order neurons are again same cells of substantia gelatinosa. So posterior, which is located in the posterior horn of spinal cord, and fibers from here cross to the opposite side and ascend as anterior spinothalamic tract. Here it is in the anterior white column. There it is in the lateral white column. Here it is in the anterior white column. And third order neurons, again same thing, ventral posterolateral nucleus of thalamus. From here they project to the sensory cortex of the cerebrum. Now we can see here. So here you can see these are the first order neurons in the dorsal root ganglia. You can observe here. This blue line is the anterior spinothalamic tract coming to the anterior white column and then ascending up to the thalamus, from there to the sensory cortex. And again you can see the red one is the lateral spinothalamic tract coming to the lateral white column and then ascending up. So both here they will enter into the dorsal lateral tract of each and then to the substantia gelatinosa, and from there they cross to the opposite side and ascend. And ultimately they are going to reach the ventral posterolateral nucleus and then to the sensory cortex. So spinocerebellar tracts. So again, name itself speaks from spinal cord to cerebellum. So this is mainly concerned with unconscious proprioception and muscle coordination. Both anterior and posterior spinocerebellar tracts both are concerned with unconscious proprioception and muscle coordination. So in this we'll be dealing mainly with the posterior spinocerebellar tracts. The first order neurons are the dorsal root ganglia. Second order neurons, these axons which come from the dorsal root ganglia, they enter into the spinal cord and they reach the nucleus dorsalis or Clark's column. So from here the second order neurons will pass to the dorsolateral part of the white column. It is on the same side and ascend on the same side as posterior spinocerebellar tracts. So they pass through the inferior cerebellar peduncle and they relay in the ipsilateral cerebellar cortex. So this is on the same side, ipsilateral side. Again, if you observe anterior spinocerebellar tracts, almost all points are same, like concerned with unconscious proprioception and muscle coordination. First order neurons are same, dorsal root ganglia. They enter and then they relay in second order neurons area, that is the nucleus dorsalis or Clark's column. And fibers from here pass to the anterolateral part of the lateral white column, that is towards the opposite side. Here it is the same side, here it is to the opposite side, and ascending on the opposite side as anterior spinocerebellar tract, and they are going to enter into the ipsilateral cerebral cortex through superior cerebellar peduncle. So note both spinocerebellar tracts carry sensations from lower limb. Then who is carrying sensations from upper limb? It is the cuneocerebellar fibers. So there will be accessory cuneate nucleus in the medulla. So that is concerned with the cuneocerebellar fibers, which carries unconscious proprioceptions from upper limb. So now you can see here, the red one is the posterior spinocerebellar tract. They have entered nucleus dorsalis or Clark's column, relaying the second order neurons. You can see here they are going onto the ipsilateral side, the posterior spinocerebellar tract, and going through the inferior cerebellar peduncle of the same side to the same side cerebellar cortex. And if you observe here the blue line, so this is again the dorsal root ganglia coming to the nucleus dorsalis or Clark's column, but here it is crossing to the opposite side, the anterolateral part of the white column. Then it ascends as the anterspinocerebellar tract. Ultimately it has to go back into the ipsilateral cerebellum through superior cerebellar peduncle after crossing back. So they will reach up to the level of midbrain. From there they are going back to the same side cerebellar cortex. So few others also say that these fibers will go to the opposite cerebellum, and after entering cerebellum they will return back and they will enter into the same side cerebellum either through superior or middle cerebellar peduncle, so which is controversial till date. So there are some published literature proving that. So let us see in future if it is confirmed and edited and printed in the textbooks, then we'll believe it. So now to give you a summary, so lateral spinothalamic tract, location lateral white column, origin is from posterior horn cells of the spinal cord of the opposite side. Then so this is, I am telling this tract, this is completely explained in relation to the spinal cord. So you can see posterior horn cells of the spinal cord of the opposite side. But before that, the first order neuron is coming from the dorsal root ganglia. So then they'll go up to the ventral posterior nucleus of thalamus. So from there they'll go to the sensory cortex. So they carry pain and temperature from opposite side of the body. So anterior spinothalamic tract, anterior white column. Again, same posterior horn cells of spinal cord of the opposite side. Then ventral posterior nucleus of thalamus carries light touch, pressure, tickle, and itch sensation from opposite side of the body. So spinotectal tract. So this is from the lateral white column. So posterior horn cells of the spinal cord of the opposite side, then they are going directly to the superior colliculus of the tectum of midbrain. So this is concerned with visuomotor reflexes. Then what is this actual visuomotor reflex is head and eye movements towards the source of stimulation. Like if you are seeing any kind of moving object, something like that, you need to turn your head and neck towards that moving object. That's kind of visuomotor reflexes are controlled by spinotectal tract. In spinocerebellar tract, you can see here anterior and posterior spinocerebellar tracts present in lateral white column. So they are superficial. So again, posterior horn cells of the spinal cord of same side. They reaches the cerebellum. They are concerned with unconscious proprioception. Facialis, dorsalis, and facialis communicatus called as tract of column Burdak. Again, posterior column of the spinal cord location. So if you observe, so the dorsal root ganglia of the spinal nerves are the same side. So in the spinal cord, they are not relying directly. These tracts are traveling up. The nucleus dulcis and nucleus communicatus in the middle of the same side. They are concerned with joint sense, vibration sense, two-point discrimination, stereognosis, and conscious kinesthesia. So lateral and anterior spinothalamic tract, spinotectal, spinocerebellar, anterior and posterior, facialis dorsalis, and facialis communicatus. These are the most important ascending tracts. So if you summarize, lateral spinothalamic tract concerned with pain and temperature, anterior spinothalamic tract concerned with light touch, pressure, tickle, and itch sensation. Then spinotrectal tract concerned with visuomotor reflexes, spinocerebellar tract with unconscious kinesthesia, facialis dorsalis and facialis communicatus concerned with conscious kinesthesia, two-point discrimination, stereognosis, vibration sense, and joint sense. Thank you.